Hey everyone, welcome. Today I wanted to do a collective reading for everyone on how to be a human in 2020. Now, this was a really great concept for a reading that a client had recently, and I thought that it was brilliant because when I asked her, what do you want to focus on today? She said, I don't know, just how to be a human in 2020. And I thought, damn, we all need to hear something like that, don't we? So I decided to sit down today and record a new reading for all of us collectively on, how to move through the rest of 2020, how to be a human in 2020. Now, a lot of it, of course, some of the cards I've already pulled ahead of time. There's some cards here that I haven't pulled yet that we're going to do together live in this reading. So this is really about how to reorient. We've already been 7 weeks in quarantine, so there's a lot of stuff that, we've already moved through a lot already, and I'm sure that you have. I'm sure that you're also tired of hearing certain things. I want to be really upfront with a lot of this, that this is by no means a reading to diminish the emotions of everyone in this process. This is by no means meant to diminish any type of reality that every single different person has moving through this, including privilege and including non-privileged folks. Our experience of this pandemic is very different for each of us, and I'm keeping that in mind. This isn't about me preaching anything specific. This is not me imposing any of my own belief systems on this. This is like basic human stuff that I wanted to just share, and hopefully to reorient us through this next phase of quarantine, because like it or not, we're still going to be in quarantine. I know that some states at this point have begun to slowly reopen, but with the astrology of this year and just general observation, we're not out of quarantine in 2 weeks, but where are we at? This isn't about prediction. This reading is really how you can listen to this at any point, probably at any time in your life too, but to reorient in the present. So that's what I offer with this reading as well. So I'm not here to impose any belief systems, to predict anything. I'm not here to deem one person's version of reality more, right or wrong. I'm just here again to simply state observation and to hopefully ground us in moments of anxiety through the rest of this process and for the rest of 2020 specifically. So, how to be a human in 2020. The first thing that came to mind was that for me, I feel like at the start of this, a lot of people were saying, now you have the time off from work that you've always wanted to take that online course, to learn this new skill, to basically add on to your piles of stuff to do in order to, with an end goal of being productive in a new way. 7 weeks into this, I feel like that at this point in time feels really actually kind of harmful. And if you find yourself really restless and also really frustrated with time right now and feeling sticky around that, there's a good reason. And I think that this is really bringing up lots of collective shadow work. If you're someone who feels like you are using this time unwisely, who's telling you that it's unwise? What does that even mean to you? I think that if you're feeling like you're someone who is in that sense of like, you know, you're using this time in a wrong type of way, if you're using any kind of judgment to begin with around the way that you're using your time and spending your everyday in this, then that's a big thing to keep in mind. That's not little. That's pretty big. You know, it is important to check in how you're using your judgments around just your everyday life too, especially when it comes to being a harsh critic on yourself at this point. Um, you know, are you worried that you're running out of time to do new things? Are you worried that you're using your time in a wrong way? You know, are you someone who is questioning whether you've taken this opportunity to again learn new things or put new things on your plate, like finish projects that you've always wanted to do, learn things you always wanted to do? Great. If you've already done that and you're still feeling at this point like there's like almost like consumptive, like what more can I consume in this time? Because ultimately, are you actually afraid that you're running out of time to have this opportunity that you'll never have again? That's a really big deal to keep in mind too. If that's something that you're actually worried about, then perhaps there's not enough balance of that in your everyday life, whether we're in a pandemic or not. That's a really big thing to keep to question. What exactly is the discomfort of being in right now? What exactly is it speaking to you about? What kind of inner insecurity is actually coming up through this process? And this is a really good time to sit with that. Again, I'm not telling you what to do with your time either. I'm merely offering suggestions and what I feel like is more, well, there I am using my own judgment, but what I feel like, if you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to still at this point with the end goal to be productive in a new way, then I feel like that this is not really the time anymore to consume those types of ideas. I feel like it's actually kind of more harmful than it is helpful. And the reason for that being is that um, you're you're not a vehicle for production for someone else's profit. So, and again, it can be for your own profit, totally. But you are so much more than just a vehicle for production and a vehicle to receive money. Um, this is a time when many of us don't have the means right now. And that is ultimately, I think, why a lot of us are stressed out, of course. Um, and it's creating lots of different, it's bringing to the surface, almost like fumigating lots of different shadows that maybe we haven't even looked at in a really long time, or maybe ever at all. And that's also what's really scary for most of us at this point too, is that we're becoming more in contact with parts of ourselves that we didn't really know existed, and we don't really know how to handle because it maybe was a bit suppressed 20 years ago. We haven't had the tools to really integrate it within ourselves yet. So I don't think this is really the time to feel like you still need to take in all of the information to learn a new skill, unless you feel really called to do that. If it's really for the purpose of fear of running out of time, fear of not being productive, I would suggest that this is actually more of a time to examine those beliefs. What would happen, God forbid, if you had a day where you chose not to do anything? Would you be like me and be, actually really restless because you don't know what to do with your time, because you're choosing to, not learn new things or churn out content or productivity? What happens in these spaces in between when we're left to just be with ourselves? And is that really so bad? We get to rediscover ourselves in new ways. And for many people, that's scary. So again, I think this is more a time to not pile on the distractions, but to simplify things and allow the space that we're in now at this point, and for the rest of 2022, to witness who you are without distractions, without piled on responsibilities, without the need to be blank. And what it's like to wake up every day and be in a state of being. Um, Granted, still carrying all the things that we need to carry throughout the day. Like, I can't just say, don't be stressed out, because it just doesn't work like that, right? Like, I'm very well aware of the reality of that. And again, this isn't to like bypass any of these things. I'm actually suggesting you sit in the darkness and to not bypass it. That's something I said since the very beginning, but it's really easy, especially in our society today, to want to talk about the darkness. I know that love and light type spiritual bypassing and the spiritual community is something that's been going around for a very long time. And I think that, we're at a point now that many of us are aware that that's not healthy. And even when we're asking to sit in the shadow, to be in poison as medicine, to re-engage with our shadow self and sit in the unknown, that's not to say that that's not difficult, or that that's just something all of us can do all of a sudden without, that what is it like to be with yourself without any distractions, pure and simple? Where do you find yourself gravitating to in those moments? Are you're actually able to do the things for yourself that your deeper self has been reaching out, trying to reach out to you for so long to get your attention, and you finally have the space to tune into that radio station and hear the call of the inner, deeper, internal, intuitive self more. So this is the practice that is coming through for many of us at this time for the rest of 2020, no matter whether it's pandemic stuff or not. Okay, so this is a time to again, do it whatever the fuck you want, but this is the time to really learn how to trust what it means to be yourself, simply, without distraction. Yeah, that's what I got there for that introduction there. So I want to share some cards that came through. And today I decided to use 3 different decks for fun. Some decks I actually haven't used in a very long time, and a deck that of course I use all of the time. The first one here that I'm using, I pulled 1 card from this because it's a very good 1 card type of thing. And it's the Amenti Oracle deck from Jennifer Sodini. This card came through for how to be a human for the rest of 2020. I can be trusted. And I thought that that really aligned with what I channeled through earlier in this about what it's like to kind of trust ourselves when we're in the in-between. We're in an in-between space right now. We're in a state of not really being quite anchored in any type of answers. Every single one of us is left in limbo in some way. And that's really unnerving for all of us as a collective. So what this means is that a lot of us are picking up on the energy, whether you're sensitive or not, just because of the media and just what it's like to live in this day and age. It's really easy to tap into the collective sphere, again, whether you're sensitive or not. But what this invitation truly is on a deeper level is, okay, there's lots of information coming at me. A lot of this information is changing daily. I'm witnessing and I'm observing how everyone else is reacting to it. How can I respond to it in a way that's emotionally intelligent? And that comes with patience, and that comes with trusting yourself. Now, what's really interesting is that when I was shuffling my tarot cards, which is, that was an oracle card, I'm using my normal tarot deck for the rest of this spread. When I was shuffling those a card flew right out of the deck. So I always use that when that happens. And I got the King of Swords. I thought that these two cards actually made a lot of fucking sense together. I can be trusted and the King of Swords. So to me, this shows a lot about perspective. You know, how can we be still within the self and see the larger perspective here? Also, as I'm recording this, the lunar nodes, the collective lunar nodes, the transiting lunar nodes just switched into Gemini and Sagittarius, which is all about perspective and perception. Gemini is about knowledge, and Sagittarius is about integrating that knowledge and alchemizing it with our own inner truth. And then we get, voila, wisdom, philosophy, or intuitive truth or intuitive wisdom, as opposed to just data and information and what we see on the news, which is Gemini. Okay, I had to take off my jacket there for a second. I was getting real hot. So, what is it like to be you in these moments without any extra baggage, without any extra distraction, deadlines, anything like that? I'm sure many of us who are still working from home at this point have those deadlines that haven't gone away. But for a lot of others, we've lost our jobs. So, what is it like to be yourself at this stage in life without the additional distractions? The stillness of the self here. What is it like to be you without being attached to productivity? Who are you beyond just that? You are so many dimensional things, identities. So what part of you is calling out to get your attention, to come back up to the surface and to be with? Is it your inner child? Is it your inner parent? It's probably a bunch of different inner parts of yourself that haven't had a voice to the microphone in a really long time. So this is about, trusting that those inner parts of you, which is still shadow work stuff, have a voice that needs to be honored at this point. So what happens when distractions fall away? Are you afraid of that person that's there? I know that's true for many of us, whether we are willing to admit it or not. When we are stripped down to our core essential self, beyond being attached to external things like material security or jobs, identities, what are the identities that have always been there with you from the beginning? And not even a labeling thing, but who's always been there for you as an internal thing? Your inner child, your inner artist, just so many different qualities that you have. And is that what you're actually afraid of engaging with after all this time? That's really fucking important. So, are you someone like me who's got a lot of fire energy, and you become really, really restless on days when you're like, oh my God, my to-do list is done. I actually don't know what to do with myself if I'm not making or creating content for people to consume, right? So that's actually really unnerving for a lot of us. What do I do with myself? How do I feed myself now at this point? What are the lingering parts of myself that are really thirsty that I haven't watered in a long time? That's what this time is about. And it's okay to feel unnerved or to feel restless. It's okay literally to feel anything or any emotion about it. The point is that you're recognizing that you're having feelings around it. Even if you don't quote unquote have feelings around it, you have a feeling or emotion around it. And what's important here is to just acknowledge what it is and to not judge it and not perceive whether it's right or wrong, what if it's good or bad. It actually doesn't matter. The point is that you're feeling something, and that is a really good anchoring and starting point for moving deeper into that space to see what it is that your true needs really are right now. And I think will also open up really big paths as well. Um, who are you without the distractions? Um, there's something that I wrote down that was channeled through this, and you're seeing me looking at notes because it's really easy for me to forget things, and I already forgot it. Life is lived in the space in between. That's one of the big things that I'm seeing here in this spread that I'm going to get through much deeper in just a moment here. But life is lived in the space in between. If we think about that statement, think about how much of our life we're actually not engaging in that perspective of it. If how often are we actually learning what it means and sitting with what it means to be liminal beings, to be not anchored to one thing or the next, not to be too flexible or too flowy, but it actually means how to be more than one thing, and that how to be comfortable in the unknown and to flow with it. It's the card that came through at the end of all of this was the Hanged Man. And of course, this feels very much like hanged man stuff. And I'm going to get to that in a moment too, but there's no where to go, literally, right? So we have to learn what it's like to be in a really uncomfortable place and what the wisdom in that actually teaches us. So I kind of sat with these two cards for a moment before I continued to move on. And one of the things that I heard come through right away was, which is really interesting, I hear the heartbeat in everything around me. So this statement, I feel like, is specifically means what it's like to be in stillness and how much of our reality that we're actually truly picking up on, that we were always was always there, but we never stopped to appreciate it or to listen to it, or the fact that it's even there. We kind of missed it because we were so distracted. Um, so we're missing out on life. And now we're in a space where our perceptions are heightened, or we can choose to be in a state of higher perception. And what that truly offers us is an expanded awareness of how we're engaging in our life. And that also goes hand in hand with I can be trusted, because essentially, even with the King of Swords, which is all about perception and how we're using our own intelligence, wisdom, our own voice, our own throat chakra to spread messages of healing for all of those around us, how we're leading with our values and our minds and our intelligence, what it is that we know, as well as the fact that I can be trusted. So to me, this really feels like what we are perceiving about what are we perceiving about ourselves and our life and our surroundings, this heightened perception is coming a little bit at a standstill when we get the card, the Five of Pentacles, cut right in between there. So, of course, this means that what's making it difficult to get above the perspective, to get higher perception, to get off the ground and see the larger view of what's actually going on around us, is that we're really, really stuck right now um, in the ground, in this super grounded like mud around what it is we don't have, what it is that's not available to us. All of the structures of continual sustainment and support, like our paychecks, um, all of those structural systems put in place to help make us continue to, you know, survive, are kind of suspended, and a lot of us are left with, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are left with um, a, a momentary lack of faith, and that lack of faith is really blinding to not just seeing the larger perspective, but also in the deeper perspective within ourselves too, within the way that we're engaging with our world, within what's happening around us, how we can support ourselves and other people. Like, just all of it is really all of it is really blinded by this. And listen, um, I fucking get it. You know, it's really hard to get out of that. It's really hard to step out of objectively, you know, when you're not getting unemployment after 7 weeks, you know. Um, it's really, really difficult to step out of that when you're literally waking up every day struggling. So I fucking get it. And there's not a tarot card that's gonna quick fix that the next day for us. I wish, but it's just not how it works. So what I'm saying is, with all of this, is that with all of those things momentarily taken away, that's the key too, is that it's temporary. Keep that in mind. It is going to last for longer than 7 weeks, but think about how short of a time period this has been in the whole cycle of your life so far. It's a blip in the whole timeline of your life so far. And this is just a small story within your whole entire life. Keep that in mind. That's the bigger perspective here that is being asked to switch and surrender to through this reading, and how to be here as a human in 2020. It's to kind of lift ourselves off the ground and see that there's still a wide expanse before us of time and growth, and all the other days and months and years of your life still ahead of you. This is just a momentary chapter, momentary story in your life. That's not here for me to diminish the suffering or the struggle of this moment. Definitely can't do that, but I'm merely helping you get off the ground a little bit too, and to see what's really, really available to us too, if we choose to be there. So yeah, what's making it really difficult, obviously really difficult for us, is that we're choosing. I hate to say it that way, but it's true. We do always have a choice, especially in the way that we specifically always have a choice in how we choose to respond to life. So in this case, I know it's hard to hear, but what's making it really difficult is that we're choosing to focus on struggle. We're choosing to focus on the fact that we have like one sneaker stuck in the mud, but like the rest of our body might actually be free. And granted, that's not for me to diminish everything. That's just for me to put it in a different perspective. So because of that, there's lots of feelings, there's lots of emotions and kind of reactions that we're seeing happen in the world right now with the no, I don't know why I want to say riots. It's not the right word. The protests with people like really wanting to end quarantine and not wearing face masks and all that bullshit. We're seeing that happening. We're seeing lots of fault and scapegoating in lots of different areas and arenas. We're seeing lots of people blame others for what's wrong. Um, right now, we're seeing lots of mistrust. There's always mistrust, but we're seeing even more mistrust. We're seeing lots of guilt, um, probably more personal. People higher up that are actually guilty, really, they're not really feeling that guilty because, granted, but we're feeling guilty because we can't support ourselves right now, but it's not our fault. You know, there's lots of fear around not surviving. I'll say this too, no matter who your ancestors are, you most likely do have ancestors um, who have been through a plague in some form or another. You've also had ancestors that made it out alive of that plague too. So this is, no matter who your ancestors are, I don't mean to make that a blanket statement at all, because I truly believe no matter who your ancestors are, they've been through something like this before, not on a global scale, but in their communities. Um, and if you do ancestor work, you can call on them for support and ask their guidance on this time as well. You're going to be a future ancestor of someone who's been through the plague too. Keep that in mind as well. So, what advice would you give your future self or your descendants when you become a well ancestor? What would you say to them? That's choosing to get even higher perspective, huh? So, um, how do we remain? Sorry, I was looking at my notes again. Everything just does not stay in this head of mine. How do we become still? Nope, that's not what I wanted to say. How do we still go on when all of those fears, insecurities, and anxieties are present? I don't have a perfect answer for that because I'm still figuring that out for myself. I'm still human, and each one of you who's listening to this has something different that works for you. Um, but how do we still go on with all of this present? With survival being feeling threatened in some way. Um, I think what's coming up in these cards is that I asked that specifically, how do we continue to move on? And what is coming up is that we have to, especially with the Five of Pentacles here, I'm still lingering on that card because there's a lot of medicine in it, is that we have to come to find faith within ourselves when we don't have the things that we think we need to support us. We're always left to some form of, climbing and kind of reaching for some sort of validation beyond us for support, to say we're, someone beyond me, um, reaching for validation and support because there's nothing left on this material plane to feel that feels like it's supporting us. So when we reach out with a certain amount of faith, and a lot of us have lost a lot of faith in whatever it may be, have we lost faith in ourselves at this point too? And that's specifically, um, again, here is what we're being asked to by spirit, whatever you want to call it, to actually find that's one of the things that we can do, how we can go on when we don't have anything left materially to support us or to distract us, even if I am so bold to say. How we do that is by learning how to find faith within ourselves again, and to figure out what it truly means to worship in our inner temple. Um, you know, this is going to pass. Like I said, I've already said at length, this will pass. So how do we find comfort in the present without this support? How do we like find what it's like to be here when it's really uncomfortable? I don't think we're ever going to find comfort in things like this. You know, humans are creatures of habit and comfort. And when we're so dropped out of our habits, like we are in this case, and we're choosing to be, you know, we're not choosing, we're forced to be in some way, but we're also choosing to be uh, to be safe. So to stay healthy. So for good reason, we're forced to be sheltered in place and sheltered at home for safety. But how do we find comfort if we can't like get out and explore, you know, or if we can't have all the things that we once were really comfortable with? Maybe we're never going to be comfortable, but we're actually we're meant to get past the mind, just like with yoga. It's mental yoga, it's spiritual yoga, in the sense that maybe we're not using our physical body in this case. I'm talking more metaphorically. But how do we breathe and get past the mind in this case, and get past the attachments of discomfort, and learn what it means to be in a space that's not anchored to comfort, when there are no answers, when it is in a moving, trusting and moving through the unknown, when and you don't have any control of it, you know, um, that there's wisdom that we'll find in those places that is usually never available to us in the everyday moments of even back in January for us. You know, if we're going about our everyday lives, we're not choosing. We're never really going to choose to be in the hanged man because we just don't want to be there. It's not comfortable. But now that we're all collectively forced to be in hanged man mode, over time, we're going to realize the wisdom that we've gained um, through this process that would have never been available to us before. So, some of the cards that also came up here, we have the Wheel of Fortune. It's a pretty good card for this case. Actually, all of these cards that came through make a lot of sense. We have the Wheel of Fortune. I'll talk about that right now. The Wheel of Fortune means that we got to learn at this point how to trust in divine timing as well, and the turn on the wheel. And we also got to learn how to center ourselves through the chaos. If this wheel is spinning like a tire on our car, you know, and there's a piece of gum that's stuck to the rim on the outside, every bump in the road that we're going to hit on our car, that gum or whatever is going to feel those bumps. This is probably not a good analogy, but we're going to feel, if we're lingering on to and attaching to the chaos, and letting it control and letting it drive us, we're going to, of course, feel all the bumps in the road, and we're going to feel more chaotic. But what if we just centered ourselves right here in the center and let it all spin around us? I bet you it's not going to be as dizzying or confusing, and I bet you're going to be able to breathe a little bit better and just let that shit roll off you a little bit easier. Again, that takes cultivation. So many of these practices are lifelong cultivating practices. So granted, there's going to be days where you're going to easily be able to do that. There's going to be days where that's going to feel nearly impossible, but you just have to keep trying. And over time, that'll be a tool in your tool belt where you can pull that Wheel of Fortune moment energy out and learn to roll with things a little bit more easy when you're not necessarily in control. So the other card that came through, I have three. So the second one that came through is the Ten of Wands reverse. This is actually the second time that I've pulled this card today. And it was also reversed too. So I was thinking about this for a while, specifically because this is like the card, I feel like, for what we're feeling right now, as well as like how to move through the rest of 2020. And I think because I think a couple things, that there's collective energy that we're all picking up on, um, that I think we're feeling like it's almost over, right? This is a 10 card, usually with completion, um, here, and it's usually connected with the community or other people. So this isn't just about you reaching a certain level of completion. This is about like the community reaching a certain level of uh, completion or finality, or an end deadline, I'll say, maybe. Um, right? Doesn't that feel like a lot of us are really itchy at this point for this to be over, for things to open back up again? And I think a lot of us are getting hopeful. I think a lot of us are getting false hope, which can, I think, totally come up with the Ten of Wands reversed. And, you know, because a lot of us are really ready for this to be over collectively, we really want to drop our weight with a lot of this. Um, but it's not. And there's probably more evasion happening because we're really itchy. We're gonna like, um, we can see the end of the tunnel. So we're gonna drop the like integrative work that we've been working on for the last few weeks, and we're gonna like rush to the finish line, like forgetting and leaving behind all of the work that still needs to be wrapped up a little bit. So we're gonna get way ahead of ourselves and really rash and impatient, um, if you don't already feel that. But we're really kind of evading the true work when we do that, I think. You know, what burdens are we still carrying when all of the distraction is gone? Um, what do we feel like we have to that we're forced to still carry when we're actually remaining still? Um, what are we carrying for others? I think another thing with this card that comes up for me is sometimes feeling as if it's really difficult to say no, because there's probably still a lot of like pride, and there's probably still a lot of like feelings of responsibility around like um, our goals. But responsibility feels like a really big word that comes up with this card because we're carrying the weight for other people too. Um, and what does it mean to be responsible during this pandemic when we're not really like engaging with normal forms of responsibility as much anymore? So I think what it means is learning to be responsible for the self, and that personal healing is collective healing, that collective healing is personal healing. um, so the way that you're healing yourself really reaches out beyond so much more than just yourself, um, than we think it does. Yeah. So there's ideas of service that's connected here, but um, I would say more specifically, dropping into taking responsibility for our healing, because ultimately that's how we kind of carry the community forward. We can't force others to heal, and we can't heal others for them. All we can do is heal ourselves. And if we're not taking that responsibility like seriously, or if we're taking it maybe even too lightly, I mean, I don't know how we could take it too lightly because it's just fucking important anyway. And there are people who, even the lightest tap into doing shadow work or personal healing is like a huge triumph. So no judgment there. Um, you know, taking responsibility for your healing, and in turn will reflect out into the community so much more than we think. And in turn, man, it's just what's needed, taking responsibility for our actions. Um, and the other big thing too with that as well is that came up at the beginning of this, now that I'm remembering, is that with I can be trusted, that word, that card, and the King of Swords. What this is, besides changing our perspective around personal healing and like removing the weight of like distraction, and being still within the self, like the person that you're left with all of that, which is everything that we've kind of summed up so far, is that, are you living in accordance with your values? Do you put your money where your mouth is? Do you hold yourself to the same standards that you hold others to? Do you say one thing about what you value and then don't really take, like, your actions don't really line up with that? Um, do you also like say those things and then, kind of fidget away around, like saying, no, it's okay because blank? Like, girl, it's what you're either living in accordance to your actual values, or you're self-sabotaging and you're not really honoring yourself and you're not really trusting yourself. You're kind of being really disloyal to yourself in those instances. And I think that's really important here, like, do you like preach a healthy lifestyle but you actually don't really eat well, or eat according to your own values, like, just as an example, that I think that's being responsible, um, being self-loyal to those things is really important. um, and that's like what's coming up here, believe it or not. um, so yeah, the last card that's coming up is strength. Strength, I think that's just more so spiritual strength in times of darkness, when we don't have the answers and we're kind of walking towards the dark tunnel because we have to. um, what externally we have to, and that's really scary. So internal strength is required for us, courage of the heart, um, you know, courage also to go within the depths and the darkness of the self. Now, we don't have some shadow integrating cards here. It's more so about just like, I think, surface levels showing up and like finding strength in the and like just being in the unknown. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. Lastly, I asked one more card, how to deepen into the 10 of Wands reverse, because that is the card that has come up for me twice today around the same thing. And we have the Hanged Man. I already mentioned that I brought this up here. So this is about perspective once again. When we are in a really uncomfortable, literal uncomfortable like position, um, we have to we eventually like learn how to breathe through it, like in yoga, for example, if we're being kind of stretched in a really uncomfortable way, but they always tell you to keep breathing. Eventually, after a few moments, if you do so, your body will surrender and you'll get past your mind that's attaching to the pain, and you'll just be. And then you gain a certain enlightened state in that moment. That's the same thing that is being required of us to do collectively and like metaphorically here in this case for the rest of 2020, is to learn how to fucking be uncomfortable. That's really hard to say, but it's just about learning to get past the mind and learning to get past the attachments to the struggle and the pain. And again, see the higher picture. Whenever I think of that, I always think of me climbing a yew tree or a really tall tree and like looking out over the branches and just seeing the forest for the trees and not focused on the little diseased part of the branch. The rest of the tree is super healthy, or there's an entire forest ahead of us to explore still. Getting caught up on those little details, getting caught up on the struggle and the pain of the discomfort. Of course, we're going to cultivate crisis. Of course, we're going to cultivate disempowerment. Of course, we're going to cultivate struggle, and we're gonna continue to struggle as long as we believe that we're struggling. Again, that's not to like negate the reality of the struggle, and there's lots of things that are just unfair in our system for so many reasons. That's not for me to bypass anything. That's for me to like just offer the acceptance of a situation, and as much as we can in moments. But I'm also saying that it's more so about gaining spiritual perspective around it. And again, the what is being offered, it may be difficult to feel into it right now, but with the distance of it a few months down the line from now, maybe even at the beginning of 2020, we'll be able to look back at this time and see the actual proof, and the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual proof of this time, and the wisdom that it actually distilled within us, that would have never have been available in times of comfort. So how can we actually learn to play in this uncomfortable state? How can we learn to dive and go a little bit deeper, to trust that the shadow, that the pain, where there is pain, there is healing that needs to happen, to trust that's just, if it's within you, and you can only focus on yourself, please only focus on yourself. That's all you can do. If you can go within those spaces, and if it feels really hard to trust, if it feels really hard to do that, and it feels especially unsafe to do so, just keep in mind all of those things are held, like emotional things, mental stories and narratives, spiritual concepts that we think about, time, whatever, like you are contained within this physical body. Whatever your relationship is to your body is for you 100%, and your body is a safe haven. Your body is always safe. It's just your relationship to it. Maybe that's the first thing you notice if you try to drop in that way and you realize that you don't feel safe in your body. Maybe that's the first thing to sit with and to gain trust around, as an example. But your body is always safe. It is always safe to be in your body. So yeah, try that. How can we learn to play within those shadows sometimes too? What do they really teach us the longer that we sit there? And how can we learn over time to embrace the fact that we are not just all love and light, but we are also darkness. And that darkness creates the depth of life and the potential and the possibility of creation too. That's a whole nother thing that we could have a whole nother video on, but that's the tarot reading. But I do have a couple more cards that that are like practical as hell advice, because this was very kind of conceptual and maybe a little bit, maybe even in this moment, like hard to hear or intangible. So I'm going to be reading 4 cards that I pulled from this. I haven't looked at them yet. I'm super excited to do this with you, but it's the 54 self-care ideas from when you're running on empty. I haven't used these cards actually since the last Venus retrograde in 2018 is when I bought these. So perfect timing, right? Okay, so I got 4 cards here. And these are going to be like super dead on, super clear, super practical, no room for like interpretation type things, just really clear and concise for things that these cards are offering us to work on as self-care for the rest of 2020. So the first one is read the happy news or a positive news website. Okay, so John Krasinski from The Office, Jim from The Office, he has a YouTube channel. He has a YouTube news show that he started doing since the pandemic, since the shelter in place, where it's called Some Good News, and he only talks about the good things that have happened that week. Check that out if you haven't read it, seen it already. Highly recommend it. But maybe that's like that. I mean, that could be a little bit of a bypassing thing, but it's also shifting your fucking perspective and not focusing on fear mongering too. There's also so many fucking good things in this world. Unsubscribe from the newsletters you no longer want to receive, the ones that clog up your inbox. See how practical some of this stuff is, and I hope that's really helpful. The third card here is get some fresh air, even if it's just sitting on your doorstep for 5 minutes. Yep, I bet most of you have already done that too, because it's spring, it's super nice. Okay, and last but not least, have a mini pamper. Yep, I've been doing that a lot for myself lately. You can see I'm like way overboard with my makeup. That's because lately it's been the only thing that has been literally lifting my energy and has been an actual like energy spell for me. So that's what I got for you for how to be a human for 2020. I hope you find it helpful. I hope, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, just let me know. And I hope I'm here for you. And I hope that you can find comfort over time through learning what it means to just be you, pure and simple, without any distractions.